what I'd like to do now is move back up to our CSS, and we're going to start adding some styles that are going to serve a purpose, and that purpose is to change the visual appearance of our website based on the viewport or the viewable window in which the user is using. So if you're on a mobile phone, we're going to need to make sure that we're rendering or presenting to the browser a different set of cascading style rules to make sure that our web page looks appropriate for that device. We don't want to have a web page that looks very stretched, or you have to zoom in on a mobile phone. We want it to be responsive to that element. So the way that we do that, as I mentioned a second ago, is we use what's known as the viewport. Now the viewport, if you remember, is at the very top of our web page. If we scroll up, you can see that we set the viewport and some initial scale content very early on in our website. So what we're going to do, we're going to go down to the bottom of our cascading style sheet rules, and we're going to add a new section. And this section is going to start with an @ sign, and it's going to be @media space screen and bracket max width 500 pixels. Then I want it to do the following sets of rules. So what it's saying there is maximum width of 500 pixels as a measurement, and the screen width, then follow these rules. So what we're going to do is, this is going to be targeting a few of our icons based around our navigation bar and a few of the elements within it. So we're going to target a nav bar. So take a look for the class. The class is a .nav bar, and we're going to put an a reference, and we're going to give it a not, and then we're going to put in some more rules, another colon, first child. So we're saying if it's not first child, then I want you to follow the following rule, and I want you to display none. So essentially what it's doing here is it's saying if it's not the first child, don't display it. We're going to add some more information. We're going to go dot navbar a dot icon, and we're going to set some rules in here. We're going to float it to the right. So that should position our icon to the right of our page, and we're going to display it as block. So as with our navigation buttons, it's going to make it as a block element. So it's rather than just text or a symbol, it's going to display it as a block element like a button. So what this is doing is it's saying if the screen, I'm just going to close the bracket for that rule and then close the bracket for the media query. And what it's saying is if the viewable window is within a certain range and the maximum width of that is 500 pixels, then it wants to display the hamburger icon and float that to the very right hand side of our screen, and not display any of the first children within our navigation bar. So what that will need us to do is add another A reference to our navigation bar in the HTML. So to add our navigation hamburger menu, we're going to need to add a new anchored hyperlink to our menu. So what we want to simply do is just a new line here, a new anchor hyperlink. So ahref equals speech mark. But this time, instead of us giving a link to a place or putting a placeholder in like we have done in the other ones, we're going to type in a JavaScript. I'm going to put colon void, and we're going to do bracket 0 bracket semicolon speech mark. And then we're going to give it a class. And the class is going to equal icon. Now obviously, as you can see, we've mentioned the class icon in our previous CSS rules. So this is going to target this element. And then when we set a new value or new property inside of this tag, we're going to give it a on click, and we want to give that an equals and speech mark. And this is going to be our trigger. So on click, we want to show nav, open bracket, close bracket, speech mark, and then our close pointer bracket. So what this is doing is it's going to call a function called showNav. We're going to write that function in a little while. We're going to write that function in JavaScript, and we're going to place it at the very bottom of our web pages. Because as you know, in order to keep the load time down happening for our pages so that all of the content loads, we put any scripts at the bottom of our pages. So I've not quite finished here because this is just the hyperlink. We want to add the actual icon itself. And we do that by adding an I, so italic, class equals speech mark FA space FA hyphen bars, close the speech mark, close the bracket, and then we're going to close our italicized element here, and then finally close our anchored hyperlink. Now, class FA hyphen bars refers to what's known as Font Awesome. And Font Awesome is a repository of icons and iconography that we can refer to enable us to have things like a hamburger menu appear. And we need to add not only our JavaScript to enable this to work, but we need to add a link to an external source, and we're going to show you that once we've added our JavaScript at the bottom of the page. So let's move down to the bottom of our page. So scroll to the very bottom of your page, and just underneath the body tag, but before the close HTML tag, we want to place our JavaScript. Now we can add a little bit of comments in here, so we can put a comment of this is the best place to add any scripts. And then close that comment there, and then we're going to write our script underneath that. So a new tag for us is the script tag. This obviously tells the browser to trigger a piece of script, and inside the script tag, I'm going to put the close tag as well whilst I'm here. Inside the script tags, we're going to place our function, and the function is what is going to be triggered when we click the button. So we call the function showNav. And we close brackets. Now, for JavaScript, what we need to do is open some curly braces or curly brackets, and we're going to give and declare a variable. And variables are declared by typing var. And the variable of x is going to equal, and then we use document dot get element by ID. Now we're going to put inside the brackets nav, capital NAV VAR, nav bar, close the speech mark, close the bracket, and then put a semicolon. So this is saying go and find within the document the element that is classed as or has an ID of navbar, and then it's going to do a following if statement. So if, then we're going to put some information in here, x dot class name. So if the class name is equal to, so I use 3 equals bar, and then we're going to open the speech mark nav bar in lowercase. Then I want it to start another condition. I want it to do something. So I want x dot class name we're going to append or equal it to speech mark responsive. Close the speech mark, semicolon. So semicolon ends that statement. However, when we do an if, there's normally an else. So if that's not true, I want it to do something else. So we type in else, open your bracket, and then we're going to give it another value, or a different alternative value, if the value is not true. X dot class name, we want that to equal lowercase nav bar. Close that speech mark, put that semicolon in there, and then we close our parentheses. So as you can see, as I'm slowly closing them, the corresponding ones are highlighted, so we know that nesting has worked properly. So that's, I'm happy with that. Let's just make sure that, yep, there's our close bracket there, all that there, and close bracket. So I'm going to save that. So as we mentioned earlier on, we're going to need to add one last thing in order for us to make our navigation bar hamburger menu appear. And we mentioned about the font awesome bars. So the way that we do that is we refer to and we use an external source. So we need to make reference to that external source, and we place that reference at the very top of our page as a relative link. And we put our relative links up here just before the style, and it's normally found within the head element. So in order for us to link to a font awesome element, we're going to open the bracket and we're going to go link rel. So link is relevant or related to a equals style sheet, style SHWET, and close the speech mark. The process that we're doing here is very similar to how we would use external style sheets later when we want to hide all of this content inside of our style element here inside its own very specific file. And we can use the same process as we're doing here to refer to it onto wherever it's stored within our folders. But because this is a style sheet created by someone else, we're going to be using a href inside here, so hyperlink reference, and we're going to give it an address. Now this address is going to be an external web address, and you'll find that if you're using many different style sheets or referring to different font awesomes, maybe they may be slightly different. But in this instance, we're going to do https:// and then we're going to put the address of where that font awesome font style is. So that's going to be cloudflare.com/ajax/libs/font-. awesome / 4.7.0 / CSS / font hyphen awesome dot min dot CSS. And yes, it is a very long URL. Now some of you might notice that there is a reference to a few things here. First one is to Cloudflare. Anybody that knows a little bit about web development knows that Cloudflare is a service that allows websites to reduce how much traffic they are dealing with on their servers. So they use a service like Cloudflare that caches content into a server so that it speeds up the load time of the website when it's stored externally. It also means that they can protect themselves from what's known as DDoS, distributed denial of service, where people try and attack their servers. So they use Cloudflare servers, which are a lot more stable and have a lot more protective software and elements attached to them. So we close that link there to our style sheet, and I want to save this. Now you might notice we've obviously gone over a long amount of lines here, so we just need to move ourselves back. A simple way to do that is just go on the next line, and then as you go down you'll notice it slowly pushes over, and you can use your cursor keys to move yourself around and move yourself back. So I'm happy with that. I've saved that, and I want to preview and see what that looks like now. So if I refresh our page over here, nothing much seems to have happened. Remember, all of the styles that we've placed in here, all of the links to the style sheet and all of the JavaScript refers to when we collapse our navigation bar to a point where the navigation becomes too bulky and it needs to be responsive. So let's check. If I was to make this window here smaller and simulate what would happen on a mobile phone, it should at a certain point snap and allow us to see that we have a navigation button that looks like a hamburger. And there we go. There's our hamburger all the way over here. Now hopefully if we've written our CSS right and all of our JavaScript right, if I click on this, the buttons that were originally here should appear. So that's not working. And that could be because we need to add a little bit more CSS in order to make our menu appear and apply some styling to it. So what we want to do is we want to move up to and back into our CSS. And this should be the final part of our puzzle being placed in so that our website starts to operate how we expect it to. So we're going to add another media query. So at media only screen and max hyphen width. We want to give a value of 500 pixels there, and we're going to close that bracket, and we're now going to add the rules, our CSS rules for that condition. So we want the dot nav bar, and its A is active, so that will be our home button, and we want to make sure that the there's some properties and rules attached to that. So let's add an open bracket, and we're going to give it a background color. And we're going to give a background color of #AAA, and we're going to give a text color or color of white, and then semicolon, close that bracket. So that's the first part. Then we want to do another little bit, but this time we're going to target the navbar itself. So class of navbar, and we want to set its position and we want it to be relative. And then we're going to close that condition there. Then we want to look at the navbar again, and we'll look at the icon. So dot icon, and we want to add its position. And we want that to be absolute. So we'll just choose that one there. And we want to give it a right value of 0 and a top value of 0, 2. And then we're going to close our condition there. Now, the final element we need to play around with within this media query in relation to our navigation bar is how we make the hyperlink work. So we want to go dot navbar dot responsive space A, and then we're going to give it its conditions, its rules. We want it to have float set to none. We want to display it as a block, and we want to text align to the left. And then we're going to semicolon and close that condition there. So what I might do at this point is just close the whole media query and save it and see if those rules have allowed our navigation bar to appear properly. So at the moment it's not working. We refresh the page. Fantastic, we've now got our navigation bar properly working, and we know that we can now see all of the navigation buttons in our responsive navigation bar.